The laser cutter sliced through the ancient vines with a satisfying hiss, sending the sweet scent of burnt vegetation into the humid air around. Nightingale Kane wiped sweat from his brow and squinted at the massive stone doorway emerging from the undergrowth. The Temple of 1,000 Winds loomed before him, its weathered facade telling stories of millennia past. "You know," Reman said, holstering his cutter, "sometimes I wonder why these temples always have to be in the most god-forsaken corners of the galaxy." Behind him, a sleek metallic drone hovered, its optical sensor glowing a sardonic blue. Padawan portable automated data analyzer with advanced navigation emitted a short mechanical sigh. "Perhaps, sir, because if they weren't, someone would have looted them centuries ago, much like you're attempting to do now." Raman shot the drone a look. "It's not looting, it's historical redistribution." "Ah yes," Padawan replied, "the noble profession of historical redistribution. I'm sure that's what they'll engrave on your prison cell should we fail spectacularly, which my calculations put at a 78.4% probability." Zor's 3 sons beat down mercilessly as Raman approached the temple entrance. Sweat plastered his raven hair to his forehead, and his stealth suit, designed for space stations and urban environments, felt like an oven in this jungle climate. The massive stone door stood half open. Excavation equipment scattered around its base. Fresh bootprints marked the muddy ground. "Well," Raman muttered, "looks like we've got competition." Padawan scanned the area, his processors whirring the Crimson Syndicate based on equipment signatures. "They arrived approximately 3 hours ago. Would you like me to calculate your diminishing chances of success now?" Pass. Raman drew his blaster and approached the entrance cautiously. He tangled with the Crimson Syndicate before professional thieves and murderers with opponent for leaving no witnesses. "What I need," he whispered, "is a distraction." As if summoned by his words, 2 figures emerged from the temple, female humanoid with the distinctive crimson jumpsuits of the Syndicate's lower-ranking members. One had the azure skin of a Thean, the other displayed the slight ridges along her neck that mark her as value, and both carried standard-issue ion rifles. Raman holstered his blaster and stepped into plain view, a charming smile spreading across his face. "Ladies, what a pleasant surprise. I thought I was the only one who appreciated ancient architecture in this sector." The Thren Axion immediately raised her weapon, but the Vusian laid a hand on her companion's arm, her eyes moving appreciatively over Raman's form. "You know, you look familiar," the Valuan said, her voice carrying the distinctive musical lilt of her species. Raman stepped closer, hands visible. "I have that kind of face. Trustworthy, wouldn't you say?" Padawan hovered nearby, emitting a barely audible electronic groan. "Oh, here we go again. Might I remind you, sir, that your last romantic entanglement resulted in us being shot at by no fewer than 17 mercenaries." Raman ignored the drone, focusing instead on the warming expressions of the guards. 20 minutes. Several outrageous compliments, and one invented story about being an independent researcher. Later, he was walking into the temple with both women who had introduced themselves as Tara and Kel. "The boss would skin us alive if he knew we were showing you around." "Tara," the Thean whispered, having warmed considerably to the charming intruder. "Your secret's safe with me," Raman assured her while mentally cataloging the temple's layout, security measures, and the Syndicate members' positions. Padawan followed silently, occasionally scanning the ancient writings on the walls and transmitting the data directly to Raman's neural implant. "Temple of the Stellar Empress, warnings of divine retribution, guardians of the eternal flame," the translation scrolled across Raman's vision. "So what exactly are you looking for in here?" Kel asked, brushing against Raman's arm as they navigated a narrow corridor. "Oh, just his historical curiosities. Nothing valuable," he lied smoothly. "I'm particularly interested in the central chamber. I've heard there's a remarkable statue there." "There is," Tara confirmed, "but the boss has been trying to extract something from it for hours. Some kind of crystal embedded in the stonework. The tear of infinity." Raman thought triumphantly. His client had offered a small fortune for the artifact, enough to clear his debt and live comfortably for a standard year. The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber, its domed ceiling reaching at least 30 meters overhead. Shafts of sunlight pierced through strategic openings, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. The walls were covered with intricate carvings depicting battles among the stars, species Raymond had never seen, and celestial phenomena that defied explanation. But what commanded the room was the statue standing at least 4 m tall on a raised dais. It depicted a woman of unearthly beauty. Her skin was a soft jade green, smooth as polished stone, yet detailed enough to suggest the subtle musculature beneath. Her face was proud, regal, with high cheekbones and full lips curved in what might have been a knowing smile. Short, sleek black hair framed her face in a perfect bob, each strand seeming to catch the light. Independently, she wore armor that resembled a blend of ancient Earth samurai designs and something altogether alien, form-fitting, yet clearly built for war. In her outstretched palm rested a teardrop-shaped crystal that seemed to contain a galaxy within its facets, stars and nebulae swirling in its depths. Magnificent, isn't she? Came a gruff voice. Raymond tore his gaze from the statue to see a burly man with cybernetic enhancements covering half his face. Corvin Drace, leader of this particular Crimson Syndicate cell and a notorious collector of artifacts, particularly those he could sell to the highest bidder. Drace Rand acknowledged with false cheerfulness. What a pleasant surprise. Kane Drace spat. I should have known you'd slither your way in here, still trading on that pretty face to manipulate my people. Tara and Kel looked between them in confusion dawning on their faces. You know each other? Kel asked. Unfortunately, Drace growled, this man is Raman Nightingale Kane, and he's here to steal what we're after. Raymond shrugged, dropping the pretense. In my defense, I was planning to steal it before I knew you were here. Purely coincidental conflict of interest. Restrain him, Drace ordered. 4 more syndicate members emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on Ron. Padawan hovered higher, his circuits humming with tension. Sir, might I suggest a tactical retreat? These odds are particularly unfavorable. Now, Padawan, where's your sense of adventure? Raymond's eyes darted around the chamber, calculating. Besides, I haven't gotten what I came for yet. Drace laughed, the sound echoing off the ancient stones. The tear of infinity. Good luck with that. We've been trying to extract it for hours. The damn thing won't budge from the statue's hand. Raman was escorted at gunpoint to the base of the statue. Up close, the craftsmanship was even more extraordinary, every detail perfect, from the creases in the armor to the eyelashes that seemed ready to flutter. I've tried laser cutters, molecular disruptors, even good old-fashioned explosives, Drace explained, gesturing to scorch marks on the statue's arm. Nothing. It's like the stone absorbs energy. Raman studied the statue's base, noticing an inscription carved in an ancient script. His neural implants struggled to translate the symbols, offering only fragments. Speak. Her name, Awaken, the Emperor, eternal bond. What does this say? Raman asked, pointing to the inscription. Durr shrugged. Some religious nonsense. Our linguists think it's a prayer or warning. Nothing useful, sir, Padawan interjected. I've cross-referenced the partial translation with my historical database. This appears to be a reference to the stellar Empress Amy de Asria, a figure from approximately 132 standard years ago. Amy de Asria. Raman repeated thoughtfully, the name rolling off his tongue with surprising ease. The chamber fell silent. Then a sound like cracking ice, soft at first, then crescendoing. All eyes turned to the statue as a hairline fracture appeared across its surface. What did you do? Drace demanded, backing away. The statue's eyelids, previously closed in serene repose, slowly opened. Emerald eyes, glowing with an inner light, blinked once, then focused directly on Rand. Holy, someone whispered. The crack spread across the statue's surface, sheets of stone falling away to reveal living green skin beneath. The woman, no longer stone but flesh, inhaled deeply, her chest rising with her first breath in a millennium. Gracious thought-provoking me ex somno, she said, her voice melodious yet powerful, echoing throughout the chamber. Thank you for awakening me from my slumber. Padawan processor's word frantically. Sir, this is most unexpected. My catastrophe probability calculations have just reached 97.3%. Raymond stood transfixed as the woman Amy stepped down from her pedestal, her movements fluid and graceful as a dancer's. She was shorter now, perhaps 180 centimeters, but her presence filled the chamber. The tear of infinity remained clutched in her hand. "You," she said, pointing directly at Raymond, "spoke my name Nin Mum in or Tuo my name in your mouth." Her perfect lips curved into a smile that was both alluring and predatory. "Do you know what that means according to the ancient laws before Raymond could answer?" Drace stepped forward, his cybernetic eye glowing red with avarice. "The crystal," he demanded. "Hand it over." "Whatever you are." Amy turned to him, her expression shifting from warmth to cold disdain in an instant. "Sentium vermis," she said dismissively. "Silence, worm." She made a subtle gesture with her free hand. Dra's body lifted from the ground, suspended by an invisible force. His eyes widened in terror as he clawed at his throat. "I do not speak to lesser beings," Amy stated calmly, as though commenting on the weather, "especially those who would defile my temple." With another casual gesture, she sent Drace flying across the chamber. He crashed into a stone column with a sickening crunch and slid to the floor, unmoving. The remaining syndicate members raised their weapons, but hesitated, clearly terrified. "Please," Raymond interjected quickly, "there's no need for more violence. I'm sure we can resolve this peacefully." Amy turned back to him, her terrifying aura instantly replaced by one of warmth and something akin to affection. "Passes Amor," she said softly, "a lover of peace. Admirable. And your name?" "Came, one who woke me." "Raymond came," he replied, "though some call me Nightingale." "Nightingale," she repeated, the word sounding exotic in her accent. "A singing bird from Terra, is it not? How appropriate. A beautiful voice that awakens the sleeping goddess." "Goddess," Raymond echoed. "Sir Padawan interrupted. My historical database suggests that Amy de Asria was worried as a deity on 47 known worlds before her mysterious disappearance. She was also known as the Conqueror of Stars, the Jade Empress, and oh dear, the Destroyer of Worlds." The remaining syndicate members finally found their courage or desperation and opened fire energy bolts streaked toward Amy, who didn't even turn to acknowledge the attack. The bolts simply vanished upon reaching her, as if absorbed into her being. "Irritant mush," she muttered, annoying flies. With a casual wave of her hand, the attackers were thrown against the walls of the chamber, their weapons crumbling to dust. "Now," she said, returning her attention to Ron, "as I was saying, according to the ancient laws of my people, the one who speaks my true name and awakens me from eternal slumber becomes my lord and my husband." Raymond blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say husband?" Itam Ki Young's muse. She confirmed, a smile playing on her lips as she stepped closer to him. "My husband, my master, the one to whom I am eternally bound." She stood before him, now close enough that he could see the subtle variations in her jade skin, smell a scent like starlight in distant galaxies. The tear of infinity glowed between them, casting prismatic lights across both their faces. "This is what you came for, is it not?" she asked, holding up the crystal. "Well, yes," Raymond admitted, "but I usually prefer to at least buy a woman dinner before marriage proposals." Enter the conversation. Amy laughed, a sound like crystal bells. "Your era's customs are charming, but our bond transcends such trivial courtships. You spoke my name, you broke my curse. Now I am yours, and you are mine." Padawan hovered nervously. "Sir, I feel compelled to point out that interspecies marriages, especially to beings of unknown origin and questionable divinity status, aren't covered in your health insurance policy." "Not helpful." Padawan Raymond muttered. A low rumble interrupted them, the temple floor trembling beneath their feet. "What's happening?" Raymond asked, grabbing a column for support. Amy's expression turned serious. "My awakening has triggered ancient safeguards," and she tilted her head as if listening to something beyond human hearing. "My enemies have been alerted to my return." "Enemies?" Raymond repeated. "What enemies?" "The ones who betrayed me, the ones who sealed me in stone for 1,000 years. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "They rule your galaxy now under different names, different faces, but I would know their essence anywhere." The rumbling intensified. Dust and small stones began to fall from the ceiling. "We need to leave," Raymond decided, grabbing Amy's arm. Now, to his surprise, she allowed herself to be led, following him toward the exit. The syndicate members who were still conscious were already fleeing Padawan. "Find us the fastest route out of here," Ramen ordered. "Already calculated, sir." Though I must note that us now apparently includes an ancient deity with homicidal tendencies and a pawn for impromptu marriages. As they reached the temple entrance, the sky above had darkened not with clouds, but with the unmistakable silhouette of a massive starship entering the atmosphere. "Fear Imperial hunters," Amy said grimly. "They've come for me, and now for you as well." My nightingale. Raymond stared at the ship, then at the beautiful, dangerous woman beside him, then at the crystal. She still held the prize he'd come for now. Seemingly insignificant compared to the complications he'd unleash. "You know," he said with a wry smile, "when I woke up this morning, I was just planning to steal a priceless artifact and retire to a beach somewhere." Amy's lips curved upward. "And instead you've stolen a goddess and ignited a war that will engulf the stars." She touched his face with surprising tenderness. "Fortuna oix who at fortune favors the bold, my husband." Padawan lights blinked rapidly. "Correction, fortune favors those with escape plans, which at present we lack." The Imperial ship was descending rapidly, weapon systems clearly charging. Ramen took a deep breath. "Well, then let's make one up as we go, shall we?" The Imperial hunter ship's landing thrusters kicked up a maelstrom of dust and debris. Raymond grabbed Amy's hand and yanked her into the dense jungle foliage as the craft's searchlight swept across the temple entrance. "Your plan is to hide in vegetation?" Amy asked, one eyebrow raised skeptically. "From beings who can track quantum signatures across galaxies." Raman ducked lower as armored figures began descending from the ship. "No, my plan is to buy us 30 seconds to come up with a better plan." Padawan hovered beside them, optical sensors dimmed to avoid detection. "If I may offer a suggestion, sir, your ship is approximately 1.7 kilometers southeast. If we could reach it before they establish a planetary lockdown protocol." "They already have." Amy interrupted, her head tilted as though listening to frequencies beyond human perception. 3 orbital destroyers have entered the system. Standard Imperium containment formation." "How do you know that?" Raman demanded. A faint smile touched Amy's lips. "The same way I know that 12 Imperial hunters are approaching our position, armed with molecular disruptors calibrated specifically to disintegrate organic matter while preserving artifacts." She tapped her temple. "Even after a millennium, some connections remain intact." The Imperial hunters moved with mechanical precision, their armor gleaming obsidian in the fading light. Each stood 2 meters tall, faces hidden behind featureless helmets that reflected the jungle around them. "Those aren't standard Imperial troops," Raman whispered. "No," Amy agreed. "Those are Patoria Ultima, the Emperor's personal executioners. I created their order originally." Something like nostalgia flickered across her face. "They've maintained their fashion sense, at least." "Created?" Raman echoed. "Just who exactly were you?" "There is no time for history lessons," she replied, suddenly alert. "They've detected us." 3 hunters pivoted in perfect synchronization, their weapons trained on the foliage where Raman and Amy hid. "Padawan distraction protocol." Raman hissed. The drone shot upward through the canopy, emitting a piercing electromagnetic pulse that momentarily disrupted the hunter systems. In that brief window of disorientation, Raman seized Amy's wrist, and they sprinted deeper into the jungle. Disruptor fire sliced through the vegetation behind them, vaporizing ancient trees into clouds of molecular ash. The jungle itself seemed to scream as centuries old life forms disintegrated. "We can't outrun them," Raman panted, leaping over a fallen trunk. "Not on foot." "Who said anything about running?" Amy replied. She stopped abruptly, turning to face their pursuers. "Tempest Pug Yandy estimated time to fight. Are you insane?" Raman grabbed her arm. "There are 12 of them, armed with weapons specifically designed to kill us." Amy's eyes flashed with emerald fire. "There were once 12,000 arrayed against me at the Battle of Anares. None survived." She gently removed his hand from her arm. "Besides, I need to test the limits of my powers after such a long slumber." What better opportunity? Before Raman could protest further, she stepped forward, arms extended outward. The very air around her began to shimmer as though reality itself was bending to her Will the ground beneath her feet cracked in a perfect circle, luminous energy seeping through the fissure's venet. Add me interfector, she called, her voice carrying unnaturally through the jungle. Come to me, killers. The hunters emerged from the undergrowth, weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, helmet retracting to reveal a face that was barely human, more machine than flesh, with glowing optical implants where eyes should be. A midday Asria, the leader, in tone, voice metallic and cold. By Imperial Decree XK 7734, you are sentenced to eternal containment. Resistance will result in permanent termination. How formal, Amy replied, a dangerous smile playing across her lips. And the human, what is his crime? Interference with an Imperial artifact. Sentence death. Ah, she nodded as if this confirmed something. Then allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Amy de Asria, Empress of Stars, creator of the Imperium. And this, she reached back to take Ramon's hand, is my consort. Harm him, and I will ensure that your precious Imperium burns from the inside out. Padawan hovered anxiously above Sir May. I point out that antagonizing heavily armed Imperial executioners rarely ends well. In my statistical analyses, the hunter commander raised his weapon. Your delusions of grandeur are noted. Artifact compliance will make your containment process less painful. Amy's laughter rang out clear and sharp as crystal. Breaking compliance was never my forte. She moved with sudden blinding speed, her hand slicing through the air. In a gesture that seemed almost casual, the hunter commander's weapon and the arm holding it separated from his body in a spray of hydraulic fluid and synthetic blood. Before the others could react, she had already closed the distance to the next two hunters, moving like a deadly dancer between them. Where her hands touched, armor crumpled like paper. Raymond stood transfixed, unable to reconcile the elegant, flirtatious woman with this efficient killing machine. 3 hunters lay incapacitated in the span of seconds, and she hadn't even broken a sweat. The remaining hunters regrouped, forming a defensive circle and unleashing a barrage of disruptor fire. Amy raised her hand, and the deadly energy beam simply stopped midair, hanging suspended like deadly light sculptures, before dissolving into harmless particles. Puri cum ludicrous, she muttered. Children with toys. With a gesture that reminded Ramon of a conductor leading an orchestra, she lifted the entire group of hunters into the air. Their armor creaked and groaned under invisible pressure. You will return to your masters, she announced, and deliver a message. Tell them the Jade Empress has awakened, and she remembers their betrayal. Tell them I have taken a new consort from among the humans, and through him I will reclaim what is mine. Her voice deepened, resonating with power. Tell them I am coming. She flicked her wrist, and the hunters were hurled through the air, crashing into the distant jungle with bone-breaking force. Ramon stared at her mouth, a gape that was not what I expected. Amy turned to him, the dangerous aura receding, replaced by the warmth she seemed to reserve only for him. What did you expect me, Amatis? That I would cower and flee? I expected us both to die, he admitted, or at the very least to engage in a desperate running battle, with slim chances of survival. There will be time for desperate battles later, she promised, her hand caressing his cheek. For now, we should seek better shelter. More will come. Padawan descended from his elevated position. If I may interrupt this, whatever this is, my sensors indicate the Imperial ship is preparing to deploy orbital bombardment protocols. In approximately 7 minutes, this entire region will be reduced to its component atoms. Ramon's survival in kicked back into gear. My ship, it's not far, but we'll never outrun the bombardment on foot. We won't need to run, Amy said. Do you trust me, Nightingale? The question hung in the air between them. Trust her? He'd known her for less than an hour. She just casually dismantled elite Imperial troops, claimed to be the creator of the very Imperium that now hunted them, and declared him her consort, without so much as asking. Trust was a big word. And yet, yes, he found himself saying, God, help me, but yes. Her smile was radiant. She stepped close to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Hold tight to me. And your floating servant as well. Technically, I'm an advanced artificial intelligence with autonomous. Padawan began. Padawan, just get over here, Rand interrupted, grabbing the drone and pulling it close. Amy closed her eyes in concentration. The air around them began to vibrate, molecules oscillating at increasing frequencies. Raymond felt a peculiar sensation, As though his very atoms were loosening their connection to each other. Transfer NOS, she whispered. The world dissolved for an instant that felt like eternity. Rahman existed everywhere and nowhere, spread across dimensions, experiencing every possible version of himself simultaneously. Then, with a sensation like being snapped back by an elastic band, he solidified again. They stood beside his ship, the Nightjar, a modified Corvette-class smuggler vessel that had seen better days, but had never let him down. How did you? He stammered, steadying himself against the hull. Quantum entanglement manipulation, Amy explained casually. All matter is connected at the subatomic level. I simply reminded our particles that they could be elsewhere. Padawan systems rebooted with a series of chaotic beeps that was most unpleasant. My positronic matrix was temporarily experiencing existence in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Also, sir, we have approximately 4 minutes before orbital bombardment. Rahman shook off his disorientation and pressed his palm against the Nightjar's identification panel. The entry ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss. All aboard, he called, hurrying Amy. Inside the ship's interior was cramped but functional, a cockpit designed for two, a small common area cargo hold, and a single cabin. Rahman slid into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. Engine ignition sequence initiated, Padawan announced, plugging into the ship systems. 3 minutes to bombardment. Amy examined the cockpit with undisguised curiosity. Your vessels have become much smaller since my time and less grandiose. This isn't exactly a royal flagship, Rahman muttered, focused on the startup sequence. It's a smuggler ship designed for speed and stealth, not grandeur. The engines roared to life just as the first orbital strikes began hitting the jungle, creating expanding rings of devastation. Raymond pulled back on the controls, and the Nightjar leaped skyward, buffeted by shock waves from the explosions, holding structural integrity at 92%. Padawan reported. Imperial destroyers have locked targeting systems on us. Of course they have, Rahman gritted, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that strained both the ship and its occupants. Any suggestions, Divine Wife? Annie closed her eyes, concentrating. I cannot affect vessels at orbital distances. Not yet. My powers are still regenerating. Disruptor beams slick through the atmosphere around them. As the Nightjar climbed higher, the blue sky gradually darkening to the black of space, the Imperial destroyers loomed ahead, massive wedge-shaped vessels bristling with weapons. Padawan stealth protocols, Rahman ordered, diving beneath the closest destroyer, engaging electromagnetic dampening and thermal masking. The drone responded, though I calculate a 72.4% probability they will still detect our engine signature. Then we'll just have to be unpredictable, Rahman muttered, executing a maneuver that sent them spiraling between two destroyers, using their mast to shield the Nightjar from the third vessel sensors. Amy watched him with growing admiration. You pilot as though you were born to it. I was, he replied, not taking his eyes off the controls. My father was an Imperial Navy commander before he retired. A shadow crossed Amy's face. Imperial Navy, then your lineage. Can we discuss family history when we're not being shot at? Rahman interrupted as proximity alarms blared. Padawan, we need a jump vector calculating optimal trajectories. The drone replied, may I suggest the Parius Nebula? Its ionized gases would provide excellent sensor coverage. Locked in, Raymond confirmed, hands dancing across the navigational array. Preparing for hyperspace. Jump in 3-2. The Nightjar shuddered as a disruptor beam grazed its starboard side. Warning lights flashed across the console. Starboard stabilizer damaged, Padawan announced. Hyperspace calculations compromised. Just get us out of here, Rahman shouted, punching the hyperspace initiator. Despite the warnings, stars stretched to infinity as the ship lurched into hyperspace, the fabric of reality bending around them. The violent entry sent them tumbling through the cabin, alarms blaring as the damage stabilizers struggled to maintain their course. After several nauseating minutes, the Nightjar emerged into normal space, trailing sparks and vapor from its